Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. Pakistan's army says Islamabad has left no stone unturned in ensuring peace in Afghanistan as Pakistan's stability is linked with peace there. In an interview, Director General of the Indus Services Public Relations, Major General Babar Iftikhar said only Afghans will have to decide their own future. He said Pakistan has upgraded the border control system, deploying regular army troops on all the notified crossings along the Afghan border. The DGISPR added that all illegal crossing points have also been sealed. Meanwhile, Taliban leader Mullah Abdul Ghani brother says there has been no progress in high-stake talks with the Kabul government. Addressing the intra-Afghan meeting in Doha, he said a centralized and independent Islamic system is necessary for prosperity. Brother said the two sides should end the lack of trust to achieve bigger goals. Colombia says a former Haitian Justice Ministry official may have ordered the assassination of President Jovenel Moise. Police Chief General George Vargas says Joseph Felix Badio directed two former Colombian soldiers 3 days before the attack. Meanwhile, Haitian authorities say the slain president's funeral will take place on the 23rd of July. And 6 days before Tokyo Olympics opening ceremony, organizers have registered first case of COVID-19 at Athletes Village, where thousands will stay during the Games. Meanwhile, Brazil logged more than 1,400 daily deaths from the virus and over 45,000 cases. In Pakistan, 39 people have died and over 2,700 tested positive for the virus in the past 24 hours. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed more than 4 million lives and has infected over 189 million people. Well, those were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. Pakistan's army says Islamabad has left no stone unturned in ensuring peace in Afghanistan as Pakistan's stability is linked with peace there. Director General of the Indus Services Public Relations, Major General Babar Iftikhar, was speaking at a special transmission on regional development. The DGISPR said only Afghans will have to decide their own future. He said Pakistan has upgraded the border control system, deploying regular army troops on all the notified crossings along the Afghan border. The DGISPR added that all illegal crossing points have also been sealed. He said Pakistan has fought a long war against terrorism and made numerous gains, and there is no longer any organized terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan. For more on this, we are joined by General Retired Amjad Shoaib, a defense analyst from Islamabad. General Shoaib, Pakistan's army says Islamabad has left no stone unturned in ensuring peace in Afghanistan as Pakistan's stability is linked with peace there. Don't you think peace spoilers are actively destroying Pakistan's efforts for the Afghan peace process?
These spoilers are spoilers. They are not interested in stability of Afghanistan. Actually, this should have been the people of Afghanistan should have been bothered about the peace in their country. But unfortunately, they have very selfish leaders and they cannot look beyond their own interests. Ashraf Ghani, particularly, he not only is playing in the Indians' hands, but at the same time, he wishes to be the president and doesn't want to leave. And we all know that he is not acceptable to the Taliban, but still he wants to cling to the position. So that way, once you are not prepared to sacrifice for a better cause, for a greater cause, then naturally the things will go in whatever direction then these can be pulled. Ashraf Ghani has been blaming Pakistan for various things, and I can think of one reason. And the reason is that he wants that Pakistan should support him. We should say that Ashraf Ghani is the president and Taliban should accept and they should agree to that. Only then he'll think that we are not supporting the Taliban. But short of that, he will always say that Pakistan is favoring Taliban and we are sending troops there or we are sending the volunteers to fight against them. This is all rubbish, but unfortunately this is what is happening, and it is because of the Indian intervention. India is absolutely monitoring everything. They have a strategic partnership agreement which they signed in 2010, and since then, 2011, October, and since then, whatever they have to say, whatever action they have to take, they have to consult the Indians. And Indians definitely, they want to look after their own interest, and their interest is to keep the Afghan pot boiling.
Right. General Shoaib, DG ISPR Major General Babar Iftikhar says the recent terrorist incident has linkage with recent security situation in Afghanistan. What do you say? Who is behind these attacks?
Yes. See, the Rasu incident particularly, it has bearing on our relationship with China and at the same time, Chinese investment in Pakistan. And there are powers who do not want to see this CPEC progressing. CIA is very much involved in it. Indian RAW is very much involved in it. And one may say even Mossad will be there. So these things are being coordinated at a very high level. So America has left Afghanistan, but they are maintaining their intelligence setup in their embassy in Kabul, and they wanted to have a footprint in Pakistan too. But then they can operate from Afghanistan, they can operate from Delhi. Why not? Why should they be looking for any other place? So they are getting complete support from NDS. They are getting complete support from India, and it's an international racket which is against Pakistan, and they are trying to destroy CPEC because of the confrontation with China.
General Shoaib, DG ISPR Major General Babar Iftikhar has warned that terrorist sleeper cells are being reactivated due to security situation in Afghanistan. What is your take?
See, the instability, whenever there is instability in Afghanistan, then whosoever is ruling the country, he will never have complete grip on the entire country. Their writ will be perhaps confined to major cities. So there will always be such areas which will not be under their control, and these terrorists, they will try to utilize those areas for their presence. They will have their sanctuaries there. And the government will never be able to touch them because they are located in such areas where the government doesn't have any writ. So unfortunately, today in Afghanistan, we have a large number of such places, particularly in the north. So when these people, they can flourish, and they also have their supporters and their patrons who are providing patronage from across the border, like RAW and Mossad and also CIA, then there is every possibility that the terrorism will increase. Whenever you have a check on them, whenever there is a government which can control the entire situation or entire country, then there will be less of terrorism. But now the security situation is deteriorating with every passing day, and the rate of the government again, I think it is disappearing. The government is totally confined to Kabul now. So all these terror groups, they'll be free, and they'll free to do anything they want to do. So Pakistan will have to be very careful. We have put up our fence that is there, but still it is not something which cannot be breached. So we have to take care of that. At the same time, there will be people who will try to enter into Pakistan in the garb of refugees. So that again has to be taken care of. Otherwise, we'll have a lot of terrorism in our country.
Lieutenant General retired Amjad Shoaib, thank you very much for speaking to Indus News. And now moving on, Taliban leader Mullah Abdul Ghani brother says there has been no progress in high-stake talks with the Kabul government. Addressing the intra-Afghan meeting in Doha, he said a centralized and independent Islamic system is necessary for prosperity. Brother said both sides should end the lack of trust to achieve bigger goals. He said the group will not allow any attempt to undermine the territorial integrity and national unity of Afghanistan. The Taliban leader said the group has repeatedly confirmed its readiness for negotiations, but Kabul needs to show the same commitment. He called on all the stakeholders to cooperate for the better future of Afghanistan. Brother also urged all parties to stand firm against ethnic, regional, linguistic, and other prejudices. Israeli forces have injured at least 75 Palestinians protesting against illegal Jewish settlements in the West Bank. The troops fired tear gas, rubber-coated bullets, and live rounds on protesters in Nablus, Kafur Kadum, and Kalkilia. The Palestine Red Crescent says 10 people were wounded by live bullets while 15 by rubber bullets. It said dozens of others suffered breathing difficulties due to inhaling the tear gas fired at the protesters. Meanwhile, Palestinian Foreign Ministry urged the UN Security Council to stop the Israeli ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. It said the conditions imposed by Israel forces undermine any chance of achieving peace on the basis of the two-state solution. In Syria, President Bashar al-Assad says the economic woes in the country are due to the funds being stuck in ailing Lebanese banks. He said this during his fourth oath-taking ceremony as president. Assad said estimates suggested the frozen funds are worth between $40 to $60 billion. He said Syria will continue to overcome difficulties caused by the Western sanctions imposed over its decade-long war. The government has blamed the country's economic woes on the sanctions and a deepening crisis in Lebanon. Assad secured a fourth term in office in a May election, winning more than 95% of the votes. But opponents and the West dispute the election by terming it a fraud. Iraq and Syria have reached an agreement on regulating their water resources. Iraq's Water Resources Minister Mehdi Rashid al-Hamdani and his Syrian counterpart Tamim Rad signed the pact. The two agreed to exchange data related to the imports of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers periodically and in emergency situations. The pact also includes the creation of technical committees. It also dictates the unification of positions regarding the quantities of water received at the Turkish-Syrian border. The two sides also agreed to share the effects of decline in water imports and the impact of climate change. In Ethiopia's Tigray region, forces have released around 1,000 government soldiers captured during the recent fighting. The ruling party's chief said both sides prepared for a showdown over contested land in the west of the region. Tigray People's Liberation Front's chief told media that more than 5,000 soldiers are still in custody and they will keep the senior officers for trial. However, Amhara Regional Administration spokesman said he has no information on the release. Fighting broke out in the region in November when the government accused the TPLF of attacking military bases across the region. Thousands of people have died in the fighting and around 2 million have been displaced so far. Colombia says a former Haitian Justice Ministry official may have ordered the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse. The development follows a preliminary investigation involving Haitian and Colombian authorities alongside Interpol. Police say Joseph Felix Badio gave directions to two former Colombian soldiers 3 days before the attack. Police Chief General Jorge Vargas said Badio also worked in the anti-corruption unit with the General Intelligence Service. Meanwhile, Colombia's Vice President and Foreign Minister Marta Luisa Ramirez said Bogota will send a consular mission to Haiti. Ramirez said they will meet with detained Colombians.
The instruction that has been given with the President of the Republic is to provide them with all the support so that they have legal assistance, to ensure that they are in adequate health conditions, that they are in a place of detention that is adequate, that life is protected, and the rights and guarantees that due process should have are also protected.
Haitian authorities say the slain president's funeral will take place on the 23rd of July. And now moving on, Beijing has strongly condemned U.S. sanctions on Chinese officials, saying it will firmly retaliate against American bullying. Washington imposed curbs on 7 Chinese individuals over what it calls Beijing's crackdown on democracy in Hong Kong. In a statement, Foreign Ministry's branch in Hong Kong said the U.S. move has seriously violated international law. It called Washington's sanctions and updated business advisory extremely unreasonable. The office accused the U.S. of smearing Hong Kong's business environment and endangering China's national security. It urged Washington to immediately cease interference in Hong Kong and China's internal affairs. More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And 6 days before Tokyo Olympics opening ceremony, organizers have registered first case of COVID-19 at Athletes Village, where thousands will stay during the Games. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed more than 4 million lives and has infected over 189 million people. More in this report.
Even with the aggressive vaccine rollouts in developed countries, the outbreaks are again emerging and spreading fast. The U.S. public health chiefs have warned of an extraordinary surge as cases are rising in all 50 states. This comes as the World Health Organization proposed another study into virus origins in China, including audits of laboratories and markets in Wuhan. Meanwhile, Chinese Foreign Ministry said the country's experts are studying the draft proposed by the health body. However, it denied the lab leak theory as extremely unlikely.
China has taken note of the draft proposed by the WHO for origin study, which are being studied by Chinese experts. China's position on the issue of global origin tracing is consistent and clear. All parties should respect the opinions of scientists and scientific conclusions instead of politicizing the issue. The plan for the next phase of study should be led by member states and agreed upon through consultation.
In Europe, the fresh wave driven by the Delta variant continues to sweep the continent. Spain's 2-week contagion rate rose to 537 cases per 100,000 inhabitants, while a new curfew is imposed in Catalonia. France reported more than 10,000 new cases again as the rapid spread of the Delta variant led to a jump in new infections. Over in Australia, disappointments have turned into despair as lockdowns have failed, vaccine rollouts start to bite back. Meanwhile, leaders of the Asia-Pacific Trade Group pledged to expand sharing and manufacturing of COVID-19 vaccines to fight the pandemic.
Now, in that regard, 4 weeks ago, APEC trade ministers met together and agreed to remove any existing trade barriers and tariffs that exist for vaccines and consumables associated with the vaccine rollout. It may surprise you to know that vaccines can in some cases face tariffs of 6%. Vials and packaging, 20% in some cases. Syringes face tariffs. So it is a very real problem that APEC economies have the ability to remove.
Meanwhile, Thailand has imposed a nationwide ban on public gatherings and is considering more restrictions amid record cases.
In Pakistan, the coronavirus has claimed 39 more lives in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the death toll has reached 22,760. The ministry said more than 2,700 people tested positive overnight. It said the caseload has crossed 986,000, out of which over 918,000 people have recovered. The ministry said there are over 45,000 active cases in the country. It noted more than 2,500 people are in critical condition. The annual Hajj pilgrimage has started in Saudi city of Makkah. Pilgrims perform a tawaf around Kaaba while maintaining a social distance. Some 2.5 million pilgrims used to visit the holiest sites of Islam in Makkah and Medina for the week-long Hajj. In response to the pandemic, Saudi Arabia has restricted the Hajj to its own citizens and residents for the second year running. The event will be limited to a maximum of 60,000 vaccinated participants. A Hajj ministry spokesperson said every 3 hours, 6,000 people enter to perform the tawaf of arrival. He said a sterilization process is carried out at the sanctuary after each group leaves. The death toll from flooding in Western Europe has risen to at least 160, while hundreds remain missing. Record rainfall caused rivers to burst their banks, devastating the region. Germany authorities say 90 people lost their lives in the Rhineland-Palatinate region. They say a further 43 people have died in neighboring North Rhine-Westphalia. In Belgium, the floods have claimed 27 lives so far. Waters are receding across much of the affected regions, but officials fear that more bodies might be found in cars and trucks that were swept away. European leaders have blamed the extreme weather on climate change. Experts say global warming makes torrential rainfall more likely. Heavy rains also hit Switzerland and Luxembourg, while the Netherlands has declared a national disaster in one southern province. In Lebanon, at least 24 people, including 10 soldiers, have been injured during demonstrations in Tripoli. Protesters clashed with the army that has been deployed to quell the unrest over the worsening socio-economic conditions. The army said 5 of the soldiers were wounded in a hand grenade attack. Meanwhile, the international community continues to call for progress in the country's stalled political process. France, the EU and the US have urged Lebanese politicians to form a new government as a matter of urgency. An international conference is also being planned to support the efforts. Earlier, Prime Minister-designate Saad Hariri stepped down over disagreements with the president on the cabinet. The UN says at least 75 children have been killed in Myanmar since February's military coup. A UN Rights Committee says it also received credible information about 1,000 children arbitrarily detained by forces. In a report, it strongly condemned the killings that it said were carried out by the security forces and police. The committee said some victims were killed in their own homes. It also pointed to the military's practice of taking children hostage when they are unable to arrest their parents. Meanwhile, in a statement, committee chair Mikiko Utani said children are under siege and facing catastrophic loss due to the coup. U.S. President Joe Biden says the spread of COVID-19 misinformation on social media is killing people. Talking to reporters, Biden said the misinformation is holding people back from getting vaccinated. Meanwhile, Facebook says it will not be distracted by such accusations. Spokesperson Kevin McClaster said the facts show the Facebook is helping save lives. The White House has been increasing pressure on social media companies to tackle disinformation. In the U.S. state of Oregon, a raging wildfire has expanded to become the state's 5th largest blaze in more than a century. The sprawling blaze in the southern part of the state forced firefighters into retreat for a 4th straight day.
The blaze, which broke out on the 3rd of July, forced evacuations from many small towns in California's 3 counties. Officials say more than 1,700 firefighters are battling with the aggressive fire. Meanwhile, the boot-like fire in Oregon has blackened 144,000 acres with no containment so far. The National Weather Service issued excessive heat warnings across much of the region. Temperatures in Death Valley spiked to 54 degrees Celsius, making it one of the hottest spots on the planet. Last year, wildfires scorched more than 17,000 square kilometers of land and destroyed hundreds of Californian homes.
NASA says every U.S. coast will experience rapidly increasing high tide floods starting from mid-2030s. The dramatic prediction pushes the previous deadline forward by about 70 years. This report has more. As climate change and its impacts continue to take a toll on the planet, the study by NASA comes as a further eye-opener. High tide floods are already a familiar problem in many cities on the U.S. Atlantic and Gulf Coast. NASA says a lunar cycle will amplify rising sea levels caused by climate change. The floods will sometimes occur in clusters, lasting a month or longer, depending on the positions of the moon, earth, and the sun. It particularly noted a dynamic, termed moon wobbling, causes the tides to vary.
But when we look at the other factors causing sea level to change, we focused in on one in particular. So what we call the nodal cycle, associated with basically the orientation, the relation of the moon relative to Earth. And what happens is that there's this very long period signal, roughly 20 years. And this effect from the moon causes the tides to vary. So what we found is that this effect lines up with the underlying sea level rise, and it will cause flooding specifically in that time period from 2030 to 2040.
NASA says the effect of the dynamic highlighted by the team applies to the entire planet. It noted the northern coastlines, like in Alaska, are rising due to unrelated geological processes. The study is already gaining traction as it changes the perception of the impacts of sea level.
But this study shows that because of how these different factors combine, we're going to see some near-term effects worsening in locations that are already feeling those effects, but starting in locations where they're not. So I think this is eye-opening for a lot of people. But again, I think it's really critical information for planners, and I think there's a great amount of interest in trying to get this information from science and scientists into the hands of planners.
Scientists identified coastal areas low enough to make them vulnerable to a 1-meter rise in sea level. They found that 62% of these low-lying areas are located in the tropics, with a third of the total in Asia. For the weather updates, we have Munib Hamid with us.
Thank you. Now we're going to start with Abu Dhabi, where the weather is expected to get a bit cloudy, with temperatures rising to 40 degrees Celsius. While in Amsterdam, the weather is partially sunny with temperatures at 24. If we head to Ankara, the weather is mostly sunny with temperatures at 38 degrees Celsius. Now, moving down under to Auckland, the rain is expected, but the temperature is chilly at 16 degrees Celsius. Now, if you are traveling to Bangkok, the clouds will be overhead because the temperatures there will be around 34 degrees Celsius. While in Beijing, there is rain with the forecast with temperatures at 29 degrees Celsius. While Beirut will experience mostly sunny weather with temperatures at 30 degrees Celsius. Now, Berliners will experience a partial sunny weather with temperatures at 26 degrees Celsius. And now heading to Cairo, the hot sun will be excruciating with 38 degrees Celsius. Now down under in Canberra, the cloudy weather is keeping things chilly at 7. In Islamabad, the sun is out with temperatures rising to 37 degrees Celsius. While in Jakarta, the temperatures are steady at 32 degrees with clouds overhead. That's all for you now. Back to you.
Thank you, Munib. That's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.